have accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lanterns Myron Rumsey and Bill Giancoli, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome back to the podcast of OA. This is episode 117. I'm Bill Giancoli, and as always, I am with the creator and the originator of all things blog of OA, Myron Rumsey. How are you, Myron?
Bill, I'm doing really, really well. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I'm quarantined in my room right now. Not because I'm sick, but everyone else in my house is sick. And all the good TV's downstairs,
So you're forced. Yeah. You're left to talk with me. See,
I'm left to talk with Myron up into a room. So help, Myron.
I am the consolation prize.
Oh, nobody puts Myron in the corner. So Myron, it's been a while. But that's becoming the norm here for you and I in our schedules. But we have a lot to talk about with Hal and the Fall of the Gods, which was a great little arc, which we're going to try to cover in this episode.
Yep. We're going to talk about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps issues 26 through 29. And then, of course, we have to talk about the Justice League movie. You and I just saw it on opening day, which is the day before we're recording this. And actually 2 days before we're recording this, because we got to see it Thursday night.
Yeah, that was it was a pleasant surprise that they released it for 6 p.m. on a Thursday, which is right about when we're kicking into high gear, Myron.
Right. Well, I called WB and I said, I'd really like to see it at 6 o'clock on Thursday. So can you please, So they, of course, obliged.
They're like, Myron, baby, for you.
So, and just to forewarn people, and we'll do it again before we actually start talking about the film, it will be I don't want to say spoiler filled, but we're going to talk about it in some detail. So if you are concerned about spoilers, you may want to skip that section when we get to it. But, we'll again provide fair warning when we get there.
Yeah. And, I think it's safe to say there probably will be a spoiler or two.
You can pretty much guarantee there will be.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. We're going to talk about the Fall of the Gods coming up.
All right. We'll be back right after this quick break. And welcome back. And I'm really excited to start talking about some comics again, Bill. So we're going to be kicking into Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps issues 26 through 29. This is kind of Robert Venditti's, I don't want to say a sequel to Godhead, but it definitely follows up on things that happened in Godhead. And it almost kind of peripherally ties into the big DC Metal event. And so we get to see the New Gods back. And it's really kind of interesting. Robert Venditti is definitely a long-form storyteller. And these metal golems that we see coming out of space to start going after the New Gods ties all the way back to issue number 13. So you're talking, a good 13 issues between this story and when we first saw them back in that, you remember that issue where we see the Zudarian Somar Lee Green Lantern talking about heroes, and you see that vision page of all these different things and events that are going to happen, and the metal golems were one of those things in that image. So again, it makes it good for those long-term readers or people that are sticking with the series, because it does kind of tie back, but yet it isn't beholden to it. You didn't have to read issue 13, obviously, to get into this story, but pretty cool. Bill, what were your thoughts about this set of issues?
I think Fall of the Gods was a great little it would make a great little trade in its own. It's a great little short storyline kind of building on some of the mythos, and there's some good action and some kind of neat things. The things I thought were interesting here were Hal and Kyle. We're seeing a lot of Hal and Kyle together. It seems like within that little 4-person human group, there seems to be even their own little cliques. John and Guy, Kyle and Hal.
Yeah. And in this arc, Hal and Kyle are kind of the Paul and John, and and John and Guy are kind of the Ringo and George.
Oh, who's Ringo?
I got to give Ringo to Guy. You know, you know.
Yeah.
Have to tie the Beatles reference in because my wife is such a huge Beatles fan. I'm kind of forced to, you know. But anyway.
She's standing over you right now with like a bat.
Yeah, I almost got hit in the back of the head. But really neat story, you know, especially for Guile. Boy, that was bad. Guile, especially for Kyle and Hal, because they really had some great moments. You know, I think the whole thing when Orion is air quote killed, and they go to Sligia, and you know the doctor there is like, I can heal Orion, but then the problem is it's going to cause the golems to come back. And God, why do I want to say Guy all the time? Kyle, you know, keeps him alive for like 24 hours of constant will, and it's such a testament to that character. He's not always the guy that's going to come in like Hal is, where he's, you know, the over the top heroic guy full of bravado. Kyle's this constant stable force, and that's really what that illustrated to me was the stability and everything else. But then you saw early on, he was kind of trying to make up for the fact that when Orion shows up, he's looking for the White Lantern Kyle, because he figured that was the only help he was going to get. And he turns out to be saved by just your everyday average Green Lantern Kyle.
Do you think it's like, did you feel bad for Kyle a little bit?
I don't know if I felt bad for him, but I thought it was a good way to, you know, I think writers have since I think even in the Jeff John era, I think Jeff struggled with what do you do with Kyle, because the whole crux of that character was built on him being the new guy. And now when he's not the only one left in the legacy, where does he fit? And I think that's been some of the struggle. And I think that's why they did the White Lantern Kyle. You know, even when they were doing Green Lantern Rebirth, I was listening to, or watching, I should say, Ethan Van Sciver's YouTube channel, and he was doing commentary tracks for all the issues of Green Lantern Rebirth. And he said right up front in the very first issue that DC said, hey, you guys can kill Kyle off if you want to, because DC didn't see the value in the character anymore. If you're going to bring back the Green Lantern Corps and Hal and everything else, we don't really need him. And they kind of, I don't want to say they minimized his importance, but they obviously didn't see the value in the character anymore. And, you know, to Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver's credit, they kind of said, no, what started off this whole era of Kyle being in charge was a divisive act, which it's a wound that hadn't healed. And if we're going to bring back Hal and the Green Lantern Corps, we're not going to commit the same mistake that DC did in 1994. Let's do it in a way that's inclusive. And so I give them credit for that. But I think since then they've struggled with how do we make Kyle an individual yet still fit into this universe that they're crafting. And so I think it's great that Robert Venditti kind of addresses that whole thing with White Lantern Kyle, but shows how, he doesn't need the white ring to be special. So I think that was great for it was a great moment for Kyle.
No, I think you're right about the stability that he brings. He's the always optimistic, positive, happy-go-lucky, and so it really was nice to see him, brought to light a lot more than I think we've seen in the past. It's always been hinted at, but that was like a great story arc of putting that in the story as an element to show that, where he has to just hold this heart, operational for how many, like 24 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
So that guy that's what makes him, a Green Lantern. And that's, you always look at the four of them as like brothers to begin with.
Yeah.
And you have the brother who's like the brooding, hothead, but loyal guy. You have John, the organized type A, this is how we get from point A to point B. And then you have Hal, the hot shot, everybody loves, popular one. And then Kyle, the sensitive younger brother, who's ultimately the best of all of them. But, I only say that because I'm a little brother. But,
I guess I'm more like Guy because I'm the middle child, and I'm always trying to prove myself.
Yeah, there you go. we've heard your rants. So
yes, I know it's awful.
So I think that's been great, and it's been consistent throughout these Hal Jordans and the Green Lantern Corps, showing that kind of brotherhood between those four. And I thought it was just nice to see how kind of, I think Kyle being highlighted, and Hal kind of echoing that in I forgot exactly the exact words, but was basically saying, hey, that's why we have Kyle. That's why he's important to us.
Yeah. And not to say that John and Guy didn't have anything to do. I mean, Guy pretty much is the comedy relief through the story. One of my favorite scenes in this little arc was when Kyle's sitting there and I don't want to say he's struggling, but he's obviously mentally exhausted, and he's trying to keep focus. And Guy walks up and says, "Hey, Kyle, try not to think about taking a whiz."
No. But you need that.
Yeah.
What's great about it too is like you look at the relationship with Guy and John. Guy's doing what he would consider menial task. But he's doing it without question.
Yeah.
And they all are to help John.
Yeah, and in John's situation, he's in this mode of whenever he deals with the new gods, it always brings back Xanshi to him in his mind. And Robert Venditti, he calls back that in issue 27. He refers back to it. He doesn't lament over it, which I think is a good thing. But John kind of questions his decision making at that point, and it's kind of the first time you see John questioning himself. And I think it's good because I think as a leader, you and I are both in management type positions. I don't know about you, but I always am like, I'm reflecting on, am I making the right decisions, and so on and so forth. And it's nice to see John as a leader be self-reflective that way. And when this situation comes up, it kind of forces that to the forefront, and we get to see that for the first time since John has taken over as the leader.
Not me, man. I shoot from the hip.
Oh, I know. No.
Yeah, your reviews are in. Yeah. I would agree. That's we're seeing, and that's what maybe this is what I think the Green Lantern universe needed for a little while, was to focus on those four humans, and then that's where we have Simon and Jessica. Where do they fit in? Are like the
who
are they, the cousins that you invite in to the mix? I don't know.
Yeah. But issue 27 did provide the backstory. Why are the golems here? It ties back to Yuga Khan, which again is Robert Venditti mining DC history. It goes back to the New Gods series from the 1990s, and Yuga Khan is the father of Darkseid. And before he was put into the Source Wall, these metal golems were part of his whole program, and they were programmed to kill off all of Yuga Khan's progeny. And so that's the reason why Yuga Khan is after Highfather, and Orion was trying to save Highfather, and was trying to be the deterrent. Didn't work. And then when we get to issue 28, you've got Hal trying to find Lightray, trying to find Lightray, and basically try to rescue Darkseid, which is a father figure. And that issue 28 was really interesting because you saw the relationship between Hal and Highfather, which you kind of saw a little bit in Godhead, but it brought back to Hal his father. And it's interesting is whether it's because he's in the contrail of Lightray that he's experiencing things on a godly level, because you kind of see outside of the jet construct, you see all the Kirby crackle and all that stuff out there, and is that causing Hal's father to show up? But it was great dialogue. I think Hal's backstory is not, he's not obviously not Batman tragic, but the story is for Hal is this is the guy that he looked up to the most, and he hasn't had that stability in his life since his father passed. So to see the moments where he's talking to his dad and his dad is providing him with inspiration, I geeked out all over that issue. That was probably my favorite issue up to this point of Robert Venditti's run, to be quite honest.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because you're seeing Hal do the impossible, and he's spurred on by his father, and you see there's an interesting dynamic between Hal and his dad, and Light Ray and his father, Highfather, and how, in the end, Highfather chooses Hal to save him. And the dynamic between the two fathers was just interesting.
Yeah, and Lightspeed's like, well, I could do it, Dad.
Yeah.
I was doing just fine. So, no, it was, I could see that. I mean, I thought that was a nice touch to that whole thing, but I didn't think of it that way. So that's, no, there is a nice parallel there. Because I guess, when you hear Highfather, I never associate them as actual biological children, but I guess they are.
Yeah.
I don't know how the gods do it, but I assume.
And
I assume he's the biological father.
Yeah, you assume. I mean,
or is there a god Maury Povich?
Yeah, well, Orion is actually Darkseid's father, but we digress.
Wait a minute. No, is it Darkseid is Orion's father?
Yes, there was an exchange of children, and so Calibac was the son of Highfather, and Orion was the son of Darkseid, and they were exchanged to try to bring peace between the new gods and Darkseid and Apocalypse.
Huh.
So there's always been a weird dynamic because Orion, that's why he's such a hothead, is because he's Darkseid's son.
But he must have got his mom's looks. I don't know.
That could be.
All right. So let's continue with the Falls of the Gods. So the golems come in, and it goes back to the source wall.
Yep. They're going to try to free Yuga Khan. Yep. Yuga
Khan, right? And so
I keep Shaka Khan keeps coming to my mind.
Yeah, I know.
If I could sing, I'd start doing the Shaka Khan with the Yuga Khan. It's bad.
So we're back at the source wall.
Thank you for reining us back in, Bill. Rein me back in.
Yeah, bringing us back to the source wall. So we're back at the source wall, and everyone goes, and they're taking on these golems. The only thing that I would say is a slight on this whole, I really enjoyed the story, but what makes it kind of, I think, drops off a little bit, is that they discover they can kill the golems by hitting them in their hearts.
Yeah, that was probably the concession that was made there was the weak point of the entire story. It was like, oh, there's a secret. It was like a 1980s arcade game. where
right.
Once you find the exact right spot to hit them once, they just fall over like a house of cards.
Yeah, it's like, why did we try there before? But still, I really liked what they were able to do here. There was a lot going on. I even liked Salak. Or Salak. He going back to his homeworld, seeing his kind of giving a little bit of more in-depth background with him. That's what's been great about this Venditti run. He's really giving a lot of detail to all the secondary role players. Which makes it a much deeper universe.
It does, and it's a huge challenge because while you've got a bi-weekly book, essentially, you're shipping twice a month. You've got 4 big characters who are basically, they're the ones in the limelight. And how do you, with a cast of literally hundreds, how do you give anybody any limelight anywhere? When's the last time Aricia really had anything to do? She's been in the background. Even Kilowog has not had a lot of lines to say, but he finds little moments. It was Rotlot Fan a couple of issues ago. This arc you got to see something with Tulab, and Salak did a little bit stuff here. They're getting things, but not as much as they to be honest, things that they should be getting more space, but you can't do that in one book, and that's the downside to DC's rebirth effort as far as the Green Lantern universe goes, is you've shoved all of this into one book. And it's hard to criticize Venditti for it because that's what the book he's been given. But I think he's doing as good of a job as you could expect anybody to do under these circumstances.
No, I absolutely. No, absolutely.
But yeah, you've go ahead, Bill.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the Green Lantern Corps, they go up there to the source wall and they're trying to prevent the golems from doing anything against getting Yuga Khan out. And, they were they were trying to, they were just trying to get Yuga Khan out of there. And then Hal shows up doing the traditional, he's flying with the thing behind him, and then he pulls away last second, and the thing behind him is what hits the bad guys.
Yeah, that was, but it works.
It does.
It's just funny because we've seen it before.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
It's okay.
It's a trope that works.
It is. It really is.
And I like the whole thing where he pulls, rather than pull the plane out, he ejects, which was neat. It was a neat visual to see the construct ejection seats come out, and then it hits the golem, because you really get a great sense of perspective in that issue. Rafa Sandoval really kind of killed it, because in one panel you see the size of the jet because it takes up half the page, and then as it gets closer to the golem, you see how tiny it really is, and when they eject, you really get such a great sense of scale. And then the explosion is fantastic, and you're like, oh, it takes an explosion of that magnitude, but really it was just, you got to hit the portal on the Death Star to get the Death Star to blow up, and
right.
so then John uses the Force with his sniper rifle, and everybody does their own little thing. I kind of had to laugh with Guy Gardner throwing the spear and hitting the guy in the magic button spot to make him explode, and he kind of just explodes like he was filled with C4.
Yeah, I know, with the sniper. But that was a nice touch.
It was. To me it seemed a little rushed.
But just showing John with the sniper rifle, going back to his, I don't know. I think the more purpose, the more I think about this episode and just some of the discussions we were having, I think what was great about this was it tied into some other bigger threats that could come on down the line, but it was really about the core this time and them in operation. It didn't feel too much like a crisis, but it showed, like, it gave highlights to a lot of different core members, and it really showed the relationship between the four main heroes, I guess we want to call them, the human lanterns. And I think this really, I would like this in trade.
Yeah, I think it reads really well as a single story. To go back to the whole father thing, there's that whole scene where High Father at the end is talking to his father, who's imprisoned in the Source Wall, and he's really taking it out on his father about being such a crappy dad. And Hal's right there kind of patting him on the back, saying, I know a good dad when I see one. And I had the best, and you're a good dad too, High Father. I like the relationship that Robert Venditti is setting up between High Father and Hal. I don't know. I just enjoyed that part. And then you see Orion in the end, and Orion then says to Kyle, who's recuperating in the bed from exhaustion, that, I'm in your debt. And it kind of sets things up for the future. And I'm hoping that we get to see more of the New Gods in this title soon. I love the New Gods. I love the mythology. I mean, Jack Kirby is a legend, and I loved how artistically throughout this entire arc, Rafa Sandoval found ways to tie that into it. I mean, you look at the cover of issue 29, and it speaks Kirby everywhere. So I really appreciated that, and it was nice just to see all of that stuff. Like I said, I miss the greater DCU cosmic universe. We don't see a lot of that anymore, except for what you see in this series. So I want more of it. I was commenting to somebody online the other day in a forum somewhere. They were asking, like, what books are you reading in DC Rebirth? And I came to the realization that other than reading the Green Lantern books, other than a series and a half, I'm not reading anything for DC right now. I feel the most disconnected from the universe as I ever have. I think the last time I've read fewer books was in the 90s. After Emerald Twilight, I stepped away, and I haven't been in that situation since then. But anyway, overall though, I think Fall of the Gods was really a fun arc. It wasn't super serious, but you could feel the stakes. It wasn't like sometimes when you have things happen, nothing's going to really come of it. And when I read through this, there were times when I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I thought maybe they were going to kill Orion off. Maybe the Fall of the New Gods, just the very title, made me think, well, maybe they're doing something with the New Gods that's going to be detrimental. Who knows? So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought the arc had a lot of action. I thought it had the right amount of humor, and most of all, it had a lot of heart.
Oh no, absolutely. I think that was a no, it's just it was a nice, well told story and everything, and it really gave you insight to, I think, everything we love about the Green Lantern Corps, at least what I like as far as how it operates as like a police force and how problems are solved, but some of the background on the individual characters as well. And there was a great balance through the whole thing. Never once was I like, oh my God, we're going so much into Hal's past. No, it's quick. Even the father scene was like a few pages, but it was quick, and you got the point, and you got a much deeper understanding of his relationship and the parallel that, like you mentioned, with Highfather and his children.
So let's take a break,
yeah,
and we'll start talking Justice League. What do you think?
All right.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
So, Myron, you and I on Thursday night at 6 p.m., which was a treat, mind you, because, we're old men and we like to go to bed at like 8:30. Yeah, so this was great to have Justice League. We went to see Justice League when it premiered, and before we get into anything, we will be spoiling it. We will be saying things that will probably be I don't think we'll give away anything that's going to be, well, honestly, we're going to give you spoilers. That's the bottom line. So if we're going to give you a moment here to just walk away.
You've been warned.
You've been warned. Okay. So, Myron, Justice League, it's finally here. They've been talking about it. Wonder Woman, big hit. A lot of high hopes for Justice League. Stories always coming out with it. Critics, Rotten Tomato has a score. Metacritic gave it a score. But when you're actually sitting there eating your popcorn, watching it on the big screen, how did you feel?
I tried to go into it without looking at reviews, without going in with a lot of pre-built hype, because I can't think of any time I've gone to a movie where I've had a lot of preconceived hype that I've enjoyed the film. So I tried to go into it in that perspective, and I came out. I really enjoyed it. Now, we went with you were there, obviously. You and I went, and we were joined by my wife and my son, who's 25. And for my son, he doesn't know. I have full disclosure. I've completely failed as a father. My son does not read comic books. But his
better call DSS.
Yeah, really. But his exposure's always been through multimedia. So his exposure to the comic book universe is the movies and the cartoons and the video games, and he's fully entrenched in those things. So he knows enough about the lore, and whenever we go to these kind of things, my wife and him are always listening to me when I go, oh, and they're like, "What is it, Dad?" Because they don't know the lore, but they know that it was something important or something cool happened, at least from a fanboy's perspective. And my son enjoyed it. My wife enjoyed it. My son noticed, and I think you did too, noticed some drop in the CGI in places. And I'll be honest, I didn't, but I don't know if it's because of age or the fact that I was so engrossed in the film that I was not paying attention to those kind of details. But my son said he noticed one spot where you could tell they were filming on a green screen. I can't claim that I saw it. A lot of people are talking about Henry Cavill's mustache. Did you know about the mustache gate at all, Bill?
I heard rumors, or I never read anything in depth. Personally, I didn't see anything like that. What they were mentioning.
Right. Yeah. The big thing is that when they did the reshoots with Joss Whedon, Henry Cavill had to grow a mustache for another film he was doing, and because that film was still in production, that studio would not allow him to shave it, so they had to CGI out the mustache. I think predominantly it was the opening sequence that we saw with Superman when he, it's the flashback, it's the kid's cell phone video.
Yeah.
I was kind of looking for it, but not, you're walking into a film suspending your belief to begin with, so I wasn't looking for it, and I honestly didn't really see it.
I didn't see it there.
Yeah.
No, you said it was like the opening cell phone.
Yeah, when you see the opening of the movie. And,
I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't there. Now, did you notice it anywhere else?
Oh, I noticed multiple places. So
with the mustache, with the mustache bit, or
not with the mustache.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
CGI drops.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. Well, if you don't mind, you want to start about the CGI?
Well,
I don't want to get into it.
It didn't take me out of the movie.
I don't think it took me out of the movie, but it was just more that it was, for me, it was enough to be like that. It made me just say, oh, that's definitely something there, that it didn't look as natural as real actors and props. Now that has never bothered me. If it bothered me, I wouldn't watch half of the crap I watch.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't. It doesn't bother me as long as they're telling the story and everything like that. But the question I have is like, let me just give this analogy or an allegory. So, as you know, I do indie comics on the side, right? Mm-hmm. And it kills me if I miss like a comma in something, or Chris and I get upset when we maybe made a mistake in some kind of panel or whatever.
And Chris is your artist, just for those.
Chris is the artist. So we're it's one of those things that if we're going to sell these, we want to give as most professional product as we can. Now, we're very fortunate. It's only two of us. But you think if you put like $300 million towards something, that like little things like that would be taken care of when they have been taken care of in lesser movies, or movies of less iconic, cultural significance, as I would say Justice League has as far as comic book readers and sci-fi and fantasy fans. So I think that's my only pet peeve with that, is the one scene. I think I know the exact one that your son was talking about. And I would like to, you should ask him, was it Aquaman?
Yes, it was Aquaman.
Yeah. And that was, that's the same kind of green screen thing that you see with like Walking Dead, where the show, there's like a faint, it's like it wasn't colored right.
Yeah, for him, he said there was like the outline of Aquaman. There was a slight.
Yes, there was. I agree with your son.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was so into the movie that I just didn't see it. And then maybe that's partially eyes. I don't know, because I wear glasses now, and my vision is not what it used to be. So I don't find myself seeing some of those details like I used to. So I didn't go into it with any of those kind of things when I walked out of the theater. I didn't notice it when it came to Steppenwolf, because there's a lot of criticism leveled at Steppenwolf. I haven't seen a CGI villain yet that looked all that great, including Thanos. So. Anytime that's where my the only CGI that I would say where they CGI'd the characters as where it was like, wow, I almost do question if they used a real was the Planet of the Apes movies. Yeah, that was really good, and so was World of Warcraft. And those are like very top. But I agree, it's very hard to do a character that looks total. CGI'd and look great, and that's forgivable, and I didn't have too much of a problem. Here's my biggest problem, and this is more of a global issue, is Steppenwolf, it wasn't like he was all that like different from like a humanoid. Right. And I think that's where the CGI becomes more difficult. The more human you try to make a CGI character look, the more difficult it is to make it look believable. And that's why didn't they just use a real actor? And I mean, they've been doing this for years, making people look a lot bigger than they are. You know what I mean? I just don't know why. I wonder if it has to do with the technology they're using. Like, I think when you look at Planet of the Apes and when you looked at the Warcraft film, they did a lot of mocap. And I don't know if they mocapped somebody or they just created them, and maybe that's the difference. I'm not enough of an expert to know, to be honest, but that's the first thing that jumps into my head.
Yeah, and so I mean, and again, I wasn't bothered by it, but I just asked that question of, what is wrong with maybe still using somebody with some good makeup? Because Steppenwolf, it wasn't like Steppenwolf was so like a different looking creature. He had horns coming out of his chin.
Yeah.
And I think, have you ever seen the movie Legend?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
With
that Tim Curry,
big red devil.
Yep, Tim Curry was the devil.
Oh, Tim Curry. Yeah, I mean, that looked awesome.
Yeah.
That's all prosthetics and a human.
Yeah.
Tim Curry.
Yep.
Yeah. So, anyways, I digress.
But the CGI aside, I thought the narrative was good. Some people said they didn't understand Steppenwolf's motivations. I thought that was pretty clear because he came right out and said it. That he'd fought. Go ahead.
There's no subtleties in this movie.
No. I mean, he comes right out and says that. I was defeated last time, and I'm trying to gain myself back into the family of the new gods, essentially. And he does mention Darkseid, and I think one of the things you and I will both agree to, that this was a very lean movie because it was either cut to 2 hours or from the get-go, it depends on the stories you read, from the get-go it was planned to be 2 hours, and they had to cut things to fit into that time frame that they'd either committed to or been told they had to commit to.
Oh no, absolutely. I think this is a no fuss, no muss movie.
Yeah. It's very lean. I mean, I think that they did a good job of bookending it with Martha and Lois, because that was kind of the heart underneath it all with the Return of Superman. So I thought that was good, but I think if they had had another even 15 minutes of extra stuff they could have put in there to make it breathe a little bit more, it would have been better than it was. And not that I'm not saying it's bad. I really liked it.
I think they would, if I was going to say the 15 minutes, it would have been great to see a little more resolve within some of the characters.
Yes, yeah.
And again, I think I liked it less than you. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I don't think much less than you. I think I just was more like, there's a couple things that I would have liked to have seen better. But going back to like the characters and adding the 15 minutes, being under 2 hours definitely limited them in some of the things, and a lot of the footage that we saw online and stuff was not in the film.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there was significant changes halfway through. And that's the thing. We got a movie that wasn't allowed to be fleshed out because of, I think, people had, they were getting a little worried about it.
Yeah.
And what they went for was a very like, hey, here's the bad guy. We need to stop them. Let's get together and do it. Boom. And it wasn't even the final, what they actually had to do to stop this wasn't complex. There wasn't a multifaceted kind of problem there. It was very much like, hey, we got to do this, switch, and it's done. Right.
And it was almost, if you, and I hate to compare movie franchises stuff, but if you look at the original Avengers film, it was destroy the command ship and they all fall over. This was separate the cubes and they all fall over, kind of thing. So
right, but and again, it's I think that was probably the step in the right direction for Justice League.
Yeah.
We just needed to get to know that they were going to stop something big.
Right.
This is the best way I could describe it. As far as I think, how I felt about the movie overall, it was like a nice scoop of vanilla ice cream. I enjoy vanilla ice cream. I enjoyed If you give me it, I would never be like, oh, just vanilla ice cream. I would enjoy vanilla ice cream. However, I've been to vanilla ice cream. I know what vanilla ice cream's all about. And I don't think I've ever been like, no, there's something different and better about this vanilla ice cream than anything else I've seen. And and again, I think it might have been how lean it might have been as far as we were saying all the footage that we saw. There was so much footage that we saw before this, leading up to this movie. And a lot of that did not make it into the film. But when I was watching it, I was kind of like saying, okay, I remember seeing this. The two major battles that were not really shown, that were not shown in any extra footage or anything, were by far my favorite parts of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can give spoilers, but it's the fight with Superman.
Right.
That was fantastic because there's things you didn't get to see before, and they did some cool things. And I even saw on many afterwards, after we saw it, I read some other reviews out there, and many people mentioned the headbutt scene.
Yeah, that was great.
And that was awesome. That was like, wow, that was super cool. That fight and the fight in the beginning where they're explaining the whole part of Steppenwolf's motivations and how this all came to be. Seeing, Shazam and some of the old heroes and a Green Lantern, which we got to see, that was great because it was like it gave us all the details we needed to know there.
Yeah. Before people get excited, it wasn't Shazam as in the comic book Shazam. It was actually, I think it was Zeus is who it was supposed to be. But,
or Zeus. Okay.
Yeah, it was Zeus. But so since you've mentioned Green Lantern, and this is a Green Lantern podcast, we probably should talk about the Green Lantern. So right. I have said from the beginning that to me, personally, a Justice League without a Green Lantern is not a Justice League. And I still feel that way. I really wished we could have gotten, even Abin Sur, who dies in the ring going to hell, or somebody showing up. I would have preferred that. But seeing how lean the movie was, I'm glad they didn't try to shoehorn it in. But what we did get was in the flashback scene, you see a Green Lantern fighting alongside the Atlanteans and the Amazons. And in watching it, the first thing that came to my mind was a Green Lantern by the name of Yalan Gur. In fact, if you look at the blog of OA, I did do an article about him being in the film, because you see it's an alien with the sharp teeth. He looks reptilian. He's got the leg wraps. He's got the cape. It ties into Green Lantern lore indirectly. In the comics, Yalan Gur was the Green Lantern of Sector 2814 back in like the 10th century. And long story short, I'll try to give a real brief history of the character. He was nearly defeated by a yellow-clad army because of the yellow impurity. The Guardians were like, oh no, we can't have one of our greatest lanterns die by this impurity, so let's remove it. They do. Yalan Gur, the power goes to his head. He tries to enslave the ancient people of 10th century China. And the Guardians who are watching this are like, well, we got to bring him back down to earth, essentially. And so they give him a weakness to wood because that's the humble tool and weapon of this primitive culture. And like, this will teach him a lesson. Well, they revolt against Yalan Gur. He's nearly pummeled to death by all these wooden weapons. And he realizes the Guardians have betrayed him. He goes to leave to go confront the Guardians, doesn't tend to his wounds. He dies while he's trying to leave Earth's orbit. And as he dies, he and the ring they catch fire, obviously melt down. It merges with the Starheart, and that becomes the meteor that drives Alan Scott's origin and explains how Alan Scott is indirectly tied to the Green Lantern Corps and had a weakness to wood. That's the abridged comic book origin of Yalan Gur. Here it
just rolls off the tongue.
Doesn't it just, So in the movie, he's fighting alongside them. You see some constructs. I thought it looked very cool for the brief 10-15 seconds he was on film. He's killed by Steppenwolf, and you see the ring go off and fly to go find a successor. I don't know whether that's Abin Sur. I don't know the timeline that well. That's my age talking. because I probably remembered it at one time. But that was who was in the film, and that was neat to see. They didn't forget about Green Lantern, but I now understand why he's not there. And had they tried to shoehorn him in with, introducing Aquaman and Cyborg and Flash, I think it would have made it a lesser film. So, as much as I disagree with not having a Green Lantern in the Justice League, I'm just as glad they didn't, to be honest.
But again, I don't feel like it. Do you think that just detracted any from it for you?
It did it to an extent. I've always had a problem with the Flash being I don't want to say comic relief, but the lighter tone character, because Barry and Wally, really were not the way they were portrayed here or in the Justice League cartoon. He's not super serious, but he's not like what you see Ezra Miller portraying him here. This is obviously a much younger Barry Allen. He hasn't even gotten his job at the police lab yet, so it's not.
Well, it was an awkward kind of humor. It wasn't, and let's put it this way: he bordered on annoying, funny for me.
There were places where he did, yeah. There were parts where it was okay because, like when he geeked out in the Batcave, I was okay with that. But there were other parts where it was a little over for me, and I'll be right up front. I can't stand that costume, but
well, honestly, I think if you read a lot of reviews afterwards and stuff, you see that a lot of people are like, "Oh, Ezra Miller, the Flash was awesome."
Yeah.
Now, Ezra Miller and his comedy and his timing of how he responded to some things was, I think, helped move the movie along.
Right, yeah.
In a certain area. However, I felt the Flash, as far as using his powers and everything, was so underused, and so it was somewhat disappointing to me.
Yeah, I think it's because of the way they were portraying the character. He didn't have the confidence to go out there and just beat the parademons down, because in reality, the Flash could have fought almost all the parademons at once.
Well, the fact that they didn't even the fight sequences with him when he does finally start taking on parademons wasn't all that. It was just like it was like a blur, and you see them getting knocked off a bridge.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, but some of the fight scenes that we've seen from the CW with the Flash has been a hell of a lot more entertaining.
I would agree. And as much as I think if he had had Hal in particular there, he could have brought levity to the story without going to that level of comedy. But they didn't, and somebody had to carry that part of the story, that part of that role, and unfortunately it fell to Barry, and to me it wasn't what I wanted Barry to be. I did like Aquaman. I didn't expect to as much. I'm not really keen on the surfer dude thing, but it worked for the movie. The scene where he's standing and he's got the magic lasso around him was was hysterically funny. It's not a new gag, but it came off very well. I thought.
Well, no, it was. He did a great job at just making a very organic, natural. How he just started leading into his feelings and everything about it. And then, it's like, oh hey.
He completely sold it. I think Cyborg was a well done character. I liked the Cyborg to me is such a fascinating character, especially in the 21st century, because that character can be used to talk about so much between man's relationship between humanity and technology, and he's the living embodiment of that. And I really enjoyed and respected seeing Cyborg at odds with his new life and at odds with what his father did to him, and seeing it evolve and his struggle to control it. And then by the end of the movie, he's got much more confidence.
Well, I think this is where I think, it was a knock for me on the movie, is that out of all the time when we were talking about if you had to add a few more minutes, what would it go towards? It would definitely go towards Cyborg.
Yeah.
I knew Cyborg, you knew Cyborg, but I think him coming into it, I don't know. He starts off talking to Wonder Woman, and it's like, yeah, you just don't know where he's at, and it's kind of a decision that just seems to be like, and that was it. This movie is very streamlined.
Yes,
it's like, Barry Allen's like, I'm scared. I don't know. I've never fought. Okay, just try. Okay, I got this.
Right.
It's like, and I think that's where this movie, I think gets, people, are critical of it.
Right.
And it's a shame because you don't know what might have been there if the studio didn't, it almost feels like I wish they took the length of Batman versus Superman, put it with this, Justice League, and really trimmed the fat and got down to it with Batman versus Superman.
Yeah. I fully expect we're going to get an extended cut when the movie comes out on home video. And I look forward to seeing what they add back in.
I would be too. It would be interesting.
Yeah. Getting back to the characters, I thought that Wonder Woman's reluctance to lead and the dynamic with Batman, to me, was very entertaining. Some people said, well, it didn't help Wonder Woman's character. It actually was a step back from her solo film. And I didn't feel that way. I felt like this was a logical continuation of she struggles because her first interaction with man's world was one in which she lost someone that she came to love, and she doesn't know how to deal with humanity, and that through this struggle she sees the other side, and Batman challenges her. That scene where she punches him and he challenges her about Steve Trevor, I thought was fantastic. I really enjoyed that, and I liked her come back to Bruce and challenging him. I thought that gave some much needed tension because there was no tension between the characters other than that. And other than you saw a little bit between Batman and Aquaman, obviously, but I thought that dynamic was really good. What did you think about that part?
I mean, yeah, it was good in very small doses, and I think you had to connect a lot of the dots there. Like I knew, as far as I thought, yeah, Batman challenging her, them having a little bicker, but it seemed to be resolved very quickly. Mm-hmm. Nothing got fleshed out. There was like little bits of it, but to Wonder Woman's credit, I thought she had the coolest action scenes throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, I agree. I don't understand the criticism about how she came off in the film. I thought she came off great. And of course, Superman, the way they brought Superman back, it was interesting. I was talking to somebody, Bill, maybe it was you, about how in the comics, Superman didn't really die when he fought Doomsday, and he healed up over time. In this, they tie it back to the Kryptonian ship and use the mother box with it. I thought in terms of the movie universe being its own thing, the fact that it called back to Batman v Superman, it made the resurrection of Superman make more sense than he wasn't really dead. But I can also see where it kind of invalidated that scene at the end of Batman versus Superman, where you see the gravel rise up from Superman's coffin.
Right. And and also I think it added a little bit more drama to a very thin plot of like, what are we doing here? Are we messing with nature, or are we, look what happened when we did it, when they tried to use this before, we had Doomsday. Right.
Everybody's questioning the reason why would you do this. Do you think after Superman comes back and we see him, do you think they finally got Superman right? Because a lot of people were critical of how Superman was portrayed in Man of Steel. And this Superman seems to be, I think we actually saw him laugh.
No, this was by far the closest Superman to what I envisioned Superman than the other. And I didn't mind Man of Steel. I liked Man of Steel. I didn't have too big of a problem. I mean, it was a guy wrestling with being super.
Right.
But I think, there is a little bit more of a solemn Superman. And even in the, Batman versus Superman was a little bit more a sullen kind of Superman. So, this one was a little bit more along the lines of the Christopher Reeve, with the smile and kind of smirk and playful almost to a point. Midwest boy, you know.
Did you get the musical cues? Did you hear those?
The Danny Elfman, definitely.
Yep. There was also an ode back to the whole John Williams Superman ode theme back from the Chris Reeves movie, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, I must have missed that.
The bigger question for me for Superman is, you can kind of explain Superman coming back, but how do you explain Clark Kent?
That's a good point. Yeah, he went back to the Daily Bugle.
You mean the Daily Planet, right?
The Daily Planet. Daily Planet.
J. Jonah Jameson didn't know what to do when Clark Kent showed back up. It was
he's like, what? Clark? No, I mean, yeah. So yeah, that's a spicy meatball to talk about when you go back to work.
And then we this was the first DC movie to have two extended scenes in the end credits. There was a scene in Suicide Squad. There was also a really cool scene for Wonder Woman that I don't know why they didn't put it in the end credits, but if you watch the Blu-ray of Wonder Woman, there's an epilogue that ties it directly to Justice League, which really should have been an end credit scene. But here we get to the whole Flash Superman thing, which that was a nice wink and a nod to classic DC books. And then you've got the return of Lex Luthor. What did you think about those?
The Superman Flash one was just a cute, it
was the shawarma scene.
Yeah, it was a shawarma scene, something to give everybody a little laugh at the end. So I mean, no harm, no foul on that one. Then you go to Lex Luthor, and that was a little better Lex Luthor than I wasn't a fan of.
Jesse Eisenberg.
When he. Sorry, I was a little interrupted with a little bit of cauliflower. Jesse Eisenberg. So it was nice to see this more. This Lex Luthor that's more in tail with what I've come to expect from him, but I really was pleased to see. Deathstroke. Yeah.
Joe Manganiello. Yeah, that was really cool to see. And I felt that Jesse's Lex Luthor here was much more tonally like a Lex Luthor you might expect a young Lex Luthor from the comics. So yeah, it was definitely more palatable than what we had seen in Batman v Superman. The whole thing of getting a League of Their Own I thought was a neat ode to potentially a Legion of Doom thing. I mean, if they do another Justice League film, and I'm assuming they're still going to, do you think it's going to be a Legion of Doom thing, or do you think this was just a throwaway?
Honestly, I think maybe that's their goal. Maybe that's their leading up to their Infinity War, if you will. Where now we see Batman with Deathstroke, a solo Batman with a Deathstroke involved, which will tie into maybe some of the other, Black Manta in the Aquaman movie. Mm-hmm. Maybe Cheetah in there's a Cheetara, and mixing up Thundercats. Cheetah.
Cheetah.
So so I think they maybe start tying these all together so they can have a legion of.
I'll just say, if you scream Wonder Woman ho, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Wonder Woman. I might. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it's going to happen right away. I hope it doesn't happen right away.
Yeah, I don't know where they're going to go with it. The whole Rotten Tomatoes thing, and it's interesting because when you look at the discrepancy between fan opinion and the critics, there's a world of difference. Cinema Score, which uses basically just audiences, it polls moviegoers on opening night to collect their demographics, it got a B+.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't think it's. Go on.
Well, there's a whole controversy right now. I was just reading earlier today that some critics are saying, I didn't give it a numerical score, or, they took what I said and published it without my knowledge. And somebody was saying, a movie that got a 2.5 out of 4 gets a rotten, but a movie that gets a 3 out of 4 gets a fresh. But nowhere did the reviewer give it a 3 out of 4 or a 2.5 out of 4. So how does that parse? So right. there's cries of scandal, and it's funny because WB I think owns Rotten Tomatoes, so if anything, you think it'd skew the other way.
Well, I mean, but Metacritic is another one that they do have some kind of system that ranks them either way, and whether it's fair or not, I don't know that. I don't know it in depth well enough. But I have to say that I think there is something to be said that I wouldn't consider this a home run by any means. Because I think when you look at I think the CGI didn't take me out of the movie. I enjoyed the movie, but there wasn't so many memorable moments or epicness to when I'm thinking of these characters on here. I almost didn't want to say, should we call it Justice League? Because like you want to see the Green Lantern, you want to see the Justice League, I would almost want to see, if they did call it, that was Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Yeah, you're right.
It almost should have been just Batman vs. Superman, and then this should have been Dawn of Justice. And then, they say, so then the next movie is, the Justice League is formed, and you have the Green Lantern, and you have everybody that you need there. This was just so, I think probably they watered it down, and I only say that because even the action wasn't, the fight sequences, they weren't as bad as Batman versus Superman. There are clear moments in Batman versus Superman where you would see punches being held back or people waiting for their turn, which I think, definitely detracts me from a movie. Or I'm also you're paying $300 million and this is an iconic thing. Why aren't you? Isn't there more people looking at it? And it speaks to a little bit of sloppiness, I think. So that's where I think Justice League, unfortunately, gets a little bit lower reviews than I think really way up there. I'd say, but it's a step in the right direction. I think DC finally has figured out a good balance. Now it's just a matter of taking it the next step, and doing it right. I don't think it's as good as Wonder Woman, in my opinion. I just think Wonder Woman hit a lot of beats right. It was exciting.
I enjoyed Wonder Woman. The third act in Wonder Woman, the last part, her final battle with Ares, left me a little underwhelmed. But other than that, I liked the movie a lot.
Well, it's because it's an old guy in a mask. That bothered me.
Well,
that bothered me. But it was just this old. They could have done. If anybody should have been CGI,
it should have been Ares.
Yeah. The
big thing for me was in the end of that movie was all the powers and abilities that Wonder Woman suddenly got. At the end of the film and how she beat him. I don't know. It just seems very, made up. But anyway,
it technically was.
yeah. It just didn't fall true to the rest of her power set. I kind of it's much like I don't like the trope where a Green Lantern goes into the power battery, gets super powered. He goes all Super Saiyan for the last fight. I don't care for that. And I didn't care for it in Green Lantern first fight, and I didn't care for it in Wonder Woman. But anyway, you talked about ranking the film compared to other movies. Now, you and I went to see Thor Ragnarok the week before I think Justice League came out.
Oh, I was thinking all DC movies.
Yeah, all DCs.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's stick with the DC movies. So,
all right.
Do you want to talk about just about the DC EU movies or DC movies from the 70s forward?
I say we go DC movies all the way through. We say just our top 5.
Okay. So go ahead.
Okay, so should we start with 5?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say 5. I'm going to say Green Lantern, which is a controversial one, I'm sure. But the reason why I say in top 5 because I think they broke the seal. And I think we saw some things cinematically that show that you could do it. I think they just my biggest pet peeve is I think Green Lantern could have been the Guardians of the Galaxy for the DC universe.
Yes.
And they missed it.
Before there was a Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, they could have. If they'd have kept it all in space.
No, absolutely. I almost think that Green Lantern, and I know this might be heresy on this, but I believe Green Lantern's origin story is less epic and dramatic than that of some of the others, of the characters of DC. So I would say if you just get out there and you're like, hey, this guy, is a Green Lantern, I would buy into the film so much more. I think even fans or non-fans of Green Lantern would buy into it so much more. I think it would be just great. Get right into, this is a space adventure about these Green Lanterns. This is Hal Jordan, and then do like a couple flashbacks of how he got it.
Yeah. I would probably rank it about in the same spot. I think it was a first for DC movies, Warner Brothers, to do this. I think, unfortunately, it came at a time when DC Entertainment wasn't strong enough to be more in control of the film. And I think they struggled with the director who didn't really understand the mythology, and a script that really got rewritten too many times. There were too many people involved in it, and it lost, suffered from vision. And I think it struggled from relying too much on the CGI, especially when it comes to the costume. So yeah, I would put that in number 5. I mean, and I know that's probably because we're looking at it through a Green Lantern fan lens. It maybe ranks higher than maybe it should, but it did set the stage for dividing the line between the Nolan verse and something new. It didn't kick off the DC cinematic universe like they hoped it would, but it did show them doing something different other than Batman and Superman for a change. Sure, we got Jonah Hex in the mix there somewhere and some other ones, but this was the first time that DC took on a big name superhero property that wasn't Batman and Superman on the big screen. So I would agree.
Broke the seal.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I would put that on my fifth spot. What about number 4?
Number 4, I'm going to go with, I will put Justice League at number 4.
Number 4?
Yep.
I would put Batman Superman at number 4 for me.
Okay.
I thought it was a good film, but I think it just... Doomsday should have been done a lot better than he was. I had a bit of a hard time with Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. But it had some good moments. But to me, it was so operatic. It was trying to be such a saga that I think it was...
It fell under its own weight.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to phrase it. It fell under its own weight. It had such grand plans, and there's no way it could live up to what it wanted to be, I guess is the best way to phrase it for me.
Right. And it's a shame because, I look forward to it. Again, maybe even just a different way of storytelling for it would have helped out. Because if you take like its counterparts in other movies that were the same length, they still were able to tell a story and keep you interested between, the narrative parts. And I that's why Batman vs Superman doesn't make it to my top 5.
Okay. What about your number 3?
Number 3 is, I'm going to say it's Wonder Woman. Yeah, Wonder Woman, I just thought I really had a great time. Very entertaining, not without its flaws. But the flaws were menial. And just, I think Chris Pine's a treat. I think he was great in that role. I was a little... The bad guy, just his face in Ares armor was a little... That's really how Ares chose to look, I don't know, but other than that, it was a fast-paced movie that you were in. It was exciting. You had exciting parts, and then the parts that were meant to be sentimental, they were. They weren't broken up with a joke or anything of that nature. But no, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman.
For me, number 3 would have to be Man of Steel.
Man of Steel, okay.
Man of Steel, yep. A lot of people didn't like the whole Superman part. There was no joy in the film. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as a very realistic take on Superman, and people were like, well, he wasn't saving people at the end of the film. And for me, my whole argument to that was that this is a Superman who's never thrown a punch at anybody before, and he's fighting against people who are militarily trained. What would you expect? But I thought it was really to me, the reason why it isn't called Superman is because it's not Superman yet. It's him becoming and learning to be Superman. And so I enjoyed it for that. Yeah, it had its problems. I didn't like the Pa Kent death scene, some of those things. But by and large, I thoroughly enjoyed the film.
No, I could see that. Man of Steel, I think I like Man of Steel.
Yeah.
But it's one of those that I think it could have been streamlined a little bit here and there.
Sure. Yeah. I agree. It could have been a little shorter.
Yeah.
What about your number 2?
Number 2 is the original Superman.
Yep.
I almost want to put him in, almost want to say the Superman 2 Donner cut. If you could put those both together, but Superman, I think that was like seeing that first when I was a kid, seeing Superman on there. I love that movie. Not John Williams, or is it John Williams?
It's John Williams. His score.
Yeah, John Williams. John Williams. His score just you were excited that you got goosebumps. You enjoy, and Christopher Reeve's portrayal of Superman was great. Now he's no hunk of flesh like Henry Cavill, but he played Superman. Just that's how I envision Superman. So, and it could be just that I was a kid and it's been imprinted on my mind, but that's where I put number 2.
For me, Justice League is number 2. And maybe that's just the freshness of seeing the film, and there's still that initial post-movie enthusiasm. But I've wanted to see a Justice League film since I was a little kid, and the most we ever got was the Legends of the Superheroes and cartoons. So I think maybe that's just nostalgia and projecting my own enthusiasm for seeing the Justice League. But I still, it's what I've always wanted to see, regardless of its flaws. So that's why I ranked it so high.
And
all
right, so
your tippy top.
My number 1. Well, Jonah Hex. No, I'm just joking.
Catwoman. No.
Yeah, Catwoman. No, it has to be The Dark Knight. The second Christopher Nolan Batman. It's just a good story. You feel all the characters on there, play the characters exactly how you would envision them. It was filled with action, intrigue. The dialogue was interesting. Characters were interesting. And just an exciting movie, and a movie that's a pretty long movie for the time, but flies right by. As you're, when you're watching it, I don't think you're ever bored in it. But really, where I think the first time too, where I think a superhero movie or a movie based on a kind of that premise is that was, I don't know. It seemed like it was just it legitimized the genre in general. Gave it like, hey, if somebody really took their time and creativity, were able to make this where it seems like, wow, we've taken it and we've said, okay, realistically, how would this go down? Christopher Nolan did a great job of doing that.
For me, the number 1 is Wonder Woman.
Really?
Yeah. And again, I don't know whether because these movies are newer, that's why they jump more to me. I mean, I have a great deal of respect for the Donner film and the Nolan movies, but for me, Wonder Woman, I thought really did a good job of portraying the heart of the character and the charm of the character. Yet still had, to me, the scene where Wonder Woman decides to go out and to walk into no man's land, to me, is one of the best, if not the best, superhero action scene in a film. And granted, it's not a lot of action, but it's what it represented, and the drama and the grandioseness of her.
Right.
That's
those are the scenes that you love in movies where
it's
like, the orchestra kicks up and you feel the emotion behind the scene, because it's shown to you in such a way. And I feel like that's where Justice League should have had those moments and did not.
Right. I would agree. But the fact that the way they captured her, and I think Gal Gadot took a lot of I don't want to say online harassment, but certainly there was a lot of criticism of her casting. And you watch that film and you understand exactly why she got the role, because she can convey all of that, the physicality of the role, the charm of the role, her naivete is perfectly portrayed. Other than the portrayal varies, like you said, I think that film was as good as it gets so far. So yeah, I love that film, and I've watched it several times since. And I don't know whether the fact that all the movies that I talked about are all in the last decade, if it's just their newness, and I just think they hold up now. And it's hard sometimes for me to look at some of the older films because they don't hold up to me anymore, despite the nostalgia. But anyway, Wonder Woman for me was my number one. So what do you say you and I take a quick break, and we'll come back and wrap this all up?
Sounds good.
This is Robert Venditti, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Myron, that wraps up episode 117. So we talked about the fall of the gods and, a little bit about father and son relationships, even, can be complicated, even amongst the gods. And we also talked about the Justice League, ranking some of our favorite DC movies. So, not bad. We're catching up a little bit here, but we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I forget to mention in the opening of the episode was I wanted to give a big shout out to the Lantern Cast. They are the longest running Green Lantern podcast out there. They just celebrated their 300th episode, which is quite a milestone. And they honored me by inviting me to be on board for their 300th episode. So if you get a chance, check it out. If you don't listen to them already, I would definitely give them a listen, because they cover content different than the way that Bill and I talk about content. So definitely check them out. But so this episode tries to catch us up a little bit, and we should be back after the Thanksgiving holiday with another episode getting us caught up fairly closely to where the Green Lantern book is, the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps book is after that. So until next time, have a great holiday. Keep your power ring charged, treat each other well, and make every day your brightest day. We'll see you soon, guys.
Gobble, gobble.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of OA. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.